News Talk 94.5 WPTI, 96.7 FM WTOB. And you're listening to the Wealth Guardian Show with Doug Ray, helping you to retire that job, then keep the paycheck. I'm Doug Ray, and with me this morning is Mr. Brice Payne. Good morning, Brice.
Good morning, Doug, and good morning, everybody out there as well. Thank you for spending a little bit of your weekend morning with us. Doug, how you doing? How you faring?
I'm doing good, except for my football teams.
I am sorry about that, but wife and I and Garrett and Cindy are actually going to the Wake Clemson game.
Oh, good. Fantastic.
That. Hey, let's go ahead. And what we're talking about here, Doug, is lessons from the strangest phobias. I like the idea of this topic. This should be a fun one today, both segments. But before we get started on that, two things we got to do. Start us off with the Wealth Guardian Service salute, if you would.
Yeah, especially now with everything going on in the mountains and down in Florida with another hurricane coming, which is going to be a monster. We thank all of you first responders, our service personnel, veterans. Thank you for your service, and especially thank you for families that let you do this for us. We appreciate it so much.
We do indeed. You're always in our thoughts here. Thank you. And let's go now, Doug, to better get to know your Wealth Guardian advisor. Something we've been doing all year is sharing a little tidbit about ourselves so everyone out there can kind of get a sense of who we are on the personal level at the Wealth Guardians. And Doug, neither you or particularly me are big city people. I love the size of Winston-Salem. I love the size of the Triad. It's big enough to have things that you like to do, but not too big. And the question to you is, if you had to go to New York City for a day for pleasure, what would be the one thing that you would want to do? What would be number one on your list if you had to go there and spend a day there?
Well, I've been there. I have no desire to go back. But if I had to, this time around, I'd probably visit the 9/11 Memorial.
Okay. Yep. Fair enough. That is beautiful. I did go to the top of that. What do they call it now? World Trade One, whatever, the Freedom Tower.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Very, very well done.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So for me, if I had to go to New York, as being a music person, New York City has one of the coolest music venues, the Beacon Theater. And it is on my bucket list to do a show, whoever it might be, at the Beacon. So there we go. Cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started on this, Doug. So in this episode, what we're doing is we're exploring some of the world's most unique and quirky fears and phobias. And believe it or not, they have a lot more in common with your financial life than you might think. So from the fear of long words to the fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of your mouth, we're going to explore how these anxieties mirror some of the biggest concerns in financial and retirement planning. So I'm going to ask for everyone's forgiveness because some of these phobias, as strange as they are, the pronunciation of them is just as strange.
So I don't even believe number one's real.
Okay, so so let's see if I can pronounce this here. Hippopotamonstrosesquipedaliophobia. I'm not going to say that again.
No,
don't. Fear of long words, appropriately enough. And so financial advisors can overwhelm clients with complex and lengthy financial plans. Doug, I like it when I go to some professional, and they try to wow me with their terminology.
Yeah.
Either they're trying to, or they do it unintentionally, but they speak their language instead of speaking yours.
Yeah, I learned many, many years ago not to use all this Wall Streetese that we know, because people don't know it. You just talk to somebody like you're just talking to your neighbor, Just make it simple.
Right. Now, if you and I were having a conversation on our subject of expertise here, we would be using our own language.
Yeah, we could talk beta and alpha and all that stuff.
Exactly. But when you sit down with somebody who doesn't do this, you need to speak their language.
Yeah.
I used to be a teacher, and I understood that if you really want to get your points across well, you have to speak you have to start where they're at, whoever your student body might be. So, yeah, find a financial planner, folks, that is speaking to you, not just trying to wow you with all the terminology that they know, because if that's their strategy, is trying to impress you with what they know, I wouldn't relate to that. If the field would be a doctor,
exactly,
that would bother me. So if it bothers you, then you need to find a financial professional who's not going to do that. Okay. That takes care of number one. Now, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Wealth Guardian Show with Doug Ray. And in the studio this morning, you've got Doug Ray and Brice Payne. And we are talking about lessons from the strangest phobias that are out there. So I'm not going to repeat what that first one was, but let's move on to the second one. And I'll see if I can say this one too. Arachibutyrophobia. Arachibutyrophobia. And that is the fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of the mouth. And this could be the fear of signing up for anything like long-term investments or entering into financial contracts that are hard to undo without big penalties. I know what I want to say about this, but go ahead. Start off.
I was just going to say, I used to love peanut butter sandwiches, and I bet I haven't had one in decades. If
you're on a little bit of a diet, does peanut butter even fit into your diet? Not too much.
I don't think so, but yeah, it's got protein.
Good peanut butter and jelly sandwich, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so for me, this one is, let's think about liquidity. If there are certain investments out there that will tie up your money. Now, that in and of itself doesn't sound great, but that's the trade-off. But there are pros to those types of investments.
Absolutely.
Yep. So you all are probably familiar with a bank CD. So the longer the bank CD is, when you're not in an inverted curve like we are right now, but normally the longer you leave the money in an FDIC CD, the higher rate of return, the higher yield is going to give you. So think about that. If you have all of your money liquid, liquidity is an asset that you are sitting on that in all likelihood, you don't need 100% of your portfolio to be liquid. Right? If you have $1 million out there and you're preparing for retirement or you just go into retirement, what is the likelihood that you are going to use all 1 million of that, or even half of that, or even a quarter of that, or perhaps even a tenth of that in 1 year? Very unlikely.
Very likely, yes.
So if you've got money you will not be using for a certain period of time, there are oftentimes options out there for investing it that locks that money up. But if you don't need it, use that to your advantage, because it's going to be, in all likelihood, better potential returns for you than something that is completely liquid. So that's my thought on that. Doug, anything to add?
We use some investments that are rather illiquid. I won't say that because you can get out of them. We do
limited liquid.
We do use annuities, and when they're used properly for the right reasons, they're very good for the overall portfolio. They limit your risk, give you the option of getting returns that used to be what we got with AAA bonds,
right?
Years ago, 5-6%,
right? But
at the same time, you have to design that portfolio so that the client has plenty of liquidity. And that could come from, the brokerage equity side of the account. You have emergency funds, always. You have emergency funds in there. And, the other thing is, I have never seen, at 36 years in this business, I have never seen anybody liquidate their entire IRA account for something.
No.
I went to church, this has been decades ago, with a person that did it, had a farm. They liquidated their IRA so they could build the infrastructure to a subdivision. Paid huge taxes that year, but it worked out great because his farm was in a little community outside of Charlotte called Weddington that absolutely ballooned.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And you mentioned annuities, but a market-linked CD is another great example. You're tying your money up for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You're participating in the market on the upside, but with very little downside risk, if any, depending on what kind of structure you have your market-linked CD. So that's another example of something that could tie up some of your money, but you would never put all of your money in something like that, but certainly a percentage of it.
So Brice, even bonds. I mean, that can your 10-year bond can go down in value.
Great example. That's right. All right. So if what we just talked about has you thinking, gosh, I wasn't aware of these kind of things, or I wasn't aware that liquidity is an asset that I'm sitting on that I could have worked to my advantage if I don't need it, then I would encourage you to give us a call and schedule a time to come in and sit down and go through our planning process with it. Doug, how much does it cost to go through our planning process?
Zero nada.
The cost of their gas to get to our office.
That's it.
There is no obligation. There is no cost to sit down with us. And we do a very holistic financial plan for the people who go through this process with us. In fact, you and I have been told many times, not just once or twice, but many times, this is the most thorough planning process they've ever been. And they've been with lots of investment advisors or multiple investment advisors over the decades. And they often come out of that saying, boy, I'd never seen anything with all the numbers that you guys put on paper. And we explain it in a way that they understand it. So if you want to sit down with us, no cost, no obligation, and go through our planning process, you do have to pick up the phone and call us 336-391-3409. That's 336-391-3409. If you're not a big fan of the phone and you would rather reach out to us by our website, that's thewealthguardians.com. And you can get scheduled, come in and sit down with us there as well. Lynn's going to answer the phone if you call, and she doesn't bite, folks.
And Brice, I'll add this. We might even give them a cup of coffee and a peanut butter cracker.
We have them in the office.
So we do.
Right. And ginger ale as well.
Yep.
One of my favorite drinks. All right. So we got to get to the trivia question so then we can get to our sponsors, and then we will get back with more of this on the other side of the break. Interesting trivia question for you since I brought up New York here earlier. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. On October 9th, 1986, do you remember where you were? 1986, October 9th? You were probably were you in the Navy at that point?
I was an instructor.
Yeah, okay. So you're down in Florida, right?
Pensacola.
All right. October 9th, 1986. This probably flew under your radar when it happened. But this musical made its theatrical debut. And this musical was written by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Richard Stilgoe, and it opened at Her Majesty's Theatre in London's West End. The plot of the musical was inspired by French author Gaston Leroux, his novel Le Fantôme de l'Opéra, which follows the life of Eric, a disfigured musical genius. This musical is significant because it is the longest running show on Broadway. What is the name of that musical? Maybe your French isn't good enough there, but think about that. All right, stick around for the answer to that trivia question, whether it's me who gives it to you or Doug who gives it to you on the other side of this break. We will be right back. This is News Talk 94.5 WPTI. This is 96.7 FM WTOB. News Talk 94.5 WPTI. 96.7 FM WTOB. Welcome back to the Wealth Guardian Show, where we help you retire the job and keep the paycheck. I'm Brice Payne in the Wealth Guardian studio this morning, along with Doug Ray. And in the second segment, we're going to continue our discussion on lessons from the strangest phobias, how phobias can be interpreted in the financial planning world. Now, before we get to the trivia question, see if we stumped Doug or stumped you, left you hanging out there at the end of that first segment, I'm going to ask you this. Are you planning to retire? Let me ask you a second question. Have you met with a retirement income certified professional who is also a fiduciary? If not, I want to invite you to take us up on a complimentary review of your current situation. So as certified retirement planning specialists, we're going to put together a customized written plan with strategies for portfolio allocation, income distribution, Social Security filing, as well as tax efficiency, with the additional benefit of often reducing both the risk and the fees of your current plan. So if you put aside at least $400,000 and you want to take us up on this no cost, no obligation review, give us a call, 336-391-3409. That's 336-391-3409. You can also go to thewealthguardians.com. That's thewealthguardians.com to learn more. Let us show you in black and white how to retire the job and keep the paycheck. Okay, trivia question time. Let's see if we stumped Doug on it. So Doug, it's all about the name. On October 9th, 1986, when you were a flight instructor down in Pensacola, this musical made its theatrical debut. It was written by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Richard Stilgoe, and it opened across the pond at Her Majesty's Theatre in London's West End. The plot of the musical was inspired by French author Gaston Leroux's novel Le Fantôme de l'Opéra, which follows the life of Eric, a disfigured musical genius. The musical is the longest running show on Broadway. And Doug, I know you are a huge fan of musicals and Broadway and all things New York. That's why I threw this trivia question out to you. So, what musical was this?
Brice, I've learned a lot of things in my life here on Earth. Musicals are the absolute unknown to me. I don't care for them. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, how is your French?
I took French in high school.
Okay, so here's the title in French: La Fantôme de l'Opéra.
The Phantom of the Opera.
There we go. There we go. You need a little.
I actually went to see that in Charlotte.
Okay, so there needed just a little pushing, but he got it. Once he got his lingual tongue going there, he figured it out. All right, very good. Did you figure it out there? That's the next question for you. Hope you did.
Here's an aside about that opera. So everybody's big fear is when you go to the theater or something that they're going to stop the show and they're going to say, "Will Doug and Sherry Ray please come to the?" Well, that happened to us.
Why?
Because my sister-in-law was looking out for the kids and her son got bit by a copperhead.
Oh, Jesus.
So,
great story, Doug. Great story.
he's fine. In fact, he's about to have his own child now, too.
We don't have that fear anymore because of our cell phones. But back then, you didn't have the cell phone, right? So they stopped the show and paid.
The Blumenthal Theater was sold out, and they stopped the show and paged us. And we were, oh, gosh.
Oh, yeah, that's when your mind starts going to the darkest of places, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Holy cow. All right. So let's continue our conversation here about phobia. So we tackled a couple phobias in the first segment. I'm not going to try to repeat them. I think these later ones here are a little bit more pronounceable. But Doug, let's talk about nomophobia. That is the fear of being without your mobile phone or disconnected from tech. And so this can kind of be the fear some clients have of being disconnected from their money or investments, leading to over-monitoring and anxiety. And what I'll say about this is, this reminds me of the saying, if you want something done right, do it yourself.
Yeah.
Now, we've all heard that, but would that apply to certain things like surgery?
No.
Probably not.
No.
And so unless you have some in-depth experience or skill at financial planning, it probably means that you can have an expert do financial planning and then do a better job than what you could do yourself. Because it's not just about investment advising. Right?
It's not.
Financial planning is a lot more than that. So what do you have to say about xenophobia there? Nomophobia, the fear of being without your mobile phone or disconnected from tech?
Well, as somebody who grew up before cell phones were invented, I find it absolutely hilarious to watch people staring at that screen. They're walking down the road and they're staring at that screen the whole time. Or kids waiting for the bus stop.
Yeah.
They're not talking to each other. They're staring at that screen.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me.
Yeah, that is, it is. But, as far as the fear goes when it comes to financial planning, a lot of people do have to get over that hump. They want to be in control themselves. They've been in control of their 401k for most of their life. Mm-hmm. And to turn that over to somebody, understandably, that's not the easiest thing to do. And they need to get disconnected from that unless they've done a bang-up job and they understand all the nuances of financial planning in retirement. I think most people don't. So that is how that phobia can relate to financial planning. Now, if you are just tuning in, you are continuing to listen to the Wealth Guardian Show with Doug Ray. I'm Brice Payne in the studio this morning, and we're talking about lessons from the strangest phobias and how they relate to financial planning fears. So that was nomophobia. Let's move on, Doug, to xenophobia. And this is the fear of the unknown. Fear of the unknown. And we can relate this to the fear that clients may have of new financial products. We were talking in the first segment for a moment about certain types of annuities. Mm-hmm. A lot of people do not have any experience in annuities. And I like to say that there is no bad financial product out there, but there are bad ways to use them. Yeah, they can be inappropriate situations.
There are, people hear things and, they just say, okay, all annuities are bad because of that. And that's just further from the truth because there's 4 different varieties of annuities.
Yes.
And, some are good for certain things and some are not.
Social Security is annuity. Yeah. Pensions can be annuities. So, you generally have a problem with those 2 things. So, but the fear of the unknown, just because your financial planner is introducing you to a new concept, something that you might not be familiar with, if they're a fiduciary and they have your best interests at heart, and that's what the obligation of a fiduciary is, what they're talking about, if they're introducing you to a concept you're not familiar with, might very well be the difference between a successful retirement and an enormously successful retirement. So yeah, just because you haven't heard of it, folks, don't knock it until you really understand it. So that's what I'm going to say about that. Anything to add, Doug, on that?
Just this word, xenophobia, xenophobic. We are hearing so much of that right now because we're deep into the political season. You know, every day somebody's using that word about somebody else.
Yeah. And, I'll move into the CTA here. A lot of people who are approaching retirement, what are the main things that they've been invested in their whole life? Stocks and bonds, usually being
CDs, mutual funds, right?
So that has gotten you as far as you have gotten. That's great. You've been in the wealth accumulation phase of life for this whole time. That means every couple of paychecks or so, every couple of weeks, you're contributing to your retirement account. But there's going to come a time, whether you're already there or you're going to be there at a certain point, where that switches around to the wealth distribution phase of life. And Doug, as you often say, losses mean more than gains in retirement. Explain that when you say that. What do you mean?
Well, you're not working anymore. You're not adding to your pot of investments. So you're not taking away from your pot of investments. You can't let the market also take it away from you because you'll never get it back.
Right. I think I like when you say that because it means, well, if you had a 20% gain in your portfolio, how much would that change your retirement picture? But if you had a 20% loss in your portfolio at the start of retirement, how much would that impact your retirement plans? That's going to have a much larger impact than you having a 20% gain. So when you enter the wealth distribution phase of life, your goals and your objectives, whether you know it or not, probably need to change. And a good financial planner, one who is a holistic financial planner, and one who's a fiduciary, can help you understand those concepts and maybe be introducing you to something that you weren't familiar with before. Like I said earlier, market-linked CDs. Raise your hand out there if you have heard of or if you know what a market-linked CD is. I would say 95% of you listening did not raise your hand. That doesn't mean that that's not going to be appropriate for you in certain cases for a certain part of your portfolio. Let a holistic financial planner talk to you about that. We are holistic financial planners here at the Wealth Guardians. And if you want to sit down and talk to us and go through our planning process, which of course there is no cost or obligation to do, then give us a call, 336-391-3409. That's 336-391-3409. You can also reach out to us via the web, thewealthguardians.com. We'd love to sit down with you and see what our skills and our expertise might be able to contribute to your retirement planning. All right, Doug, let's move on to the last one here. Atychiphobia. Atychiphobia, the fear of failure. All right. So this, Doug, the fear of failure, this could be linked to the fear of financial failure. And then whether it's making a bad investment or running out of money in retirement or not meeting financial goals. I see this all the time. I know you see it all the time. People stay in cash.
Mm-hmm.
They are just afraid of the market. It's somebody else's game. And they know that the minute that they put money into the market's going to drop. I've been there myself. I get it. I understand that fear. But you should not make your financial plans on fear or greed. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, those two words dominate people's investments and planning. You know this. Decades ago, they did this survey of, I think it was adults 65 and over. Mm-hmm. The fear of running out of money was more important to them than the fear of passing away.
Yes. So they'd rather be 6 feet under than in debt.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And so, that's being in cash. We see a lot of people who just are afraid to take that plunge. They've maybe been in mutual funds in their 401k, but at some point they moved into cash because they got afraid of the market. They spend a lot of time watching, listening to radio shows or watching the news, and they're afraid of what's going on out there, and they moved into cash. And Doug, that's not always a great thing because cash, you are still taking risk of inflation.
Absolutely.
And so that's not the greatest place to be, folks, for a large portion of your money. If that is where you're at, you probably want to sit down with a holistic financial planner and see what other options are out there for you that would still have you feeling secure, but not having you risking inflation. All right. Doug, anything more to add here before we wrap things up?
That was a fun show.
I liked it.
I'm glad we did it.
I like it. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have this week with you. Hope to see you back here next week. I want to thank you for joining us. And we hope the rest of your weekend is everything you want it to be. This is Brice Payne along with Doug Ray, the show's The Wealth Guardians, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. And I want to remind you one more time, sound financial plans do not create themselves. This is News Talk 94.5 WPTI. This is 96.7 FM WTOB.